You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, like some bottles, impress them girls. It's more than life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast and Who Dat. And before we go and start getting into any of this main course, I think it's only right that we just highlight that the mullet is back. The Mudflap is back. It is cleaned up, still super long in the back, so they didn't butcher me like some of the last times. But we looking clean on the side, and we got it good on top, and got the hair out of the eyes now. We were having to do too much playing before when we were on the podcast, having to get the hair out of my eyes, and man, all that hair and the hair like down around your face, man, it makes your face and head sweat. So we're feeling a lot better now that we got the Mudflap back. So Mudflap back. So that's enough of that. That's enough about me, I guess. But now it's time to get into quite a bit of depressing news and information, and just, I mean, it was fun while it lasted. The first two games, you couldn't have made up a better first two games to the season of just how comfortable it is sitting back and watching the wins, and then all the stuff on social media talking about, are they that great? Or maybe some people start buying in, or no, it was just the Panthers. No, it was just the Cowboys. Well, obviously that came to an end in the game against the Philadelphia Eagles. But, we were having so much fun. I was starting to think, like, really the only way that the NFL could kind of bring us down a notch or two was finding Derek Carr. I really thought that was the worst that could happen. But now with all these injuries and stuff that New Orleans Saints are facing, it feels like the gods, the football gods, or that injury bug has seen how much fun the Saints and the Saints fans and the Who Dats were having, and it feels like they had to come and take us down a peg. So that's mainly what this podcast is going to be about, is just how this season, it just seems like every season since the NOLA no call, every season has been wrecked by injuries. The last couple seasons of Drew Brees' career, he was having thumb injuries and rib injuries, and it just seems like that's just kind of spread over the whole team. So now the whole team is just like infected and just has black plague of injuries now. But anyways, let's get into this, because a lot of this is on offensive line, and they've had to do some signings and some moving around. So let's just get into this. So can I get a menu? And so the first thing is they added a couple players to the offensive line due to the injuries to obviously McCoy, who we know is on IR now, and then also Cesar Ruiz, who got banged up in the game, and it also seems to be banged up this week as well. But with some of the O-line additions, they've added, they signed Shane Luminor to their practice, to their actual roster, to the active roster. So he was originally on the practice squad, so he's like their next option for center or guard options, but was on the practice squad. So he's signed to the active roster, Shane Luminor. And then just to add some depth and emergency options if someone else goes down, which is very possible with how things are going. They've also added Chris Reed, who I guess he was just a street free agent. So hearing Dennis Allen kind of talk about the free agency market, him and Mickey Loomis, they just say it's very thin and very bare. And I think that's just how it's been for a long time. It's hard to find any quality offensive linemen even in free agency, really when it starts, like if a team has a good offensive lineman, they usually grasp and hold on very tight to them. So I don't know. I don't know if any of these guys are gonna have any production or we're gonna see anything good out of these guys. But that's just who the Saints have. So here's kind of a projection of maybe what the starting offensive line is gonna look like on Sunday to kind of prepare you guys. But I think we're gonna obviously keep Talise Fuaga out at left tackle because he's been one of your few good offensive linemen this year. You had two other ones in McCoy and Ruiz who were very consistent and solid, but they're both down with injury. But we got Talise Fuaga, like we know that he's going to be there, and then they're going to move Lucas Patrick, probably move Lucas Patrick back over to left guard where it seemed like he was starting to kind of become a little comfortable and a little more familiar with, and then of course right as he's feeling comfortable and uh, feeling familiar and kind of getting some cohesion next to Talise Fuaga and Eric McCoy next to him. Of course, one of them has to go down and he has to completely change position. But yeah, I think moving him back to left guard would probably be good. And then we're going to bring in who we activated from the practice guard and have Shane Luminor have him play the center, and then Landon Young, bringing him, which this is one that concerns me out of the whole offensive line. This one's the one that concerns me the most. Landon Young here at your right guard spot, but it's not because of his play. I think pretty much everyone from Landon Young, well, probably Trevor Penning, Landon Young, Shane Luminor, and Lucas Patrick are all on kind of the same level. Like they're okay, I guess. I guess they're good enough to be a backup, basically, is what all these guys are kind of fit to do. But my issue with Landon Young and him being a starter in this is that we've already had two offensive linemen go down with injury during the game. Well, from every experience that I've had from watching Landon Young and whenever he's actually played for them, he usually always gets hurt, and he's coming off of an injury right now. So with the offensive line, I wouldn't be surprised to see Landon Young or someone else on the offensive line go down against the Falcons. But that's what you got. There's not a lot else you could do about it. There's no way to make it better. I guess you could do some trades or at the trade deadline or something like that. You just gotta hope Cesar Ruiz comes back and that Eric McCoy is more on that 6 week mark of coming back instead of 8 or not at all, depending on how many losses the Saints have. But that's what you got. That's your offensive line there. Let's get into. So we talked about offensive line. We talked about the mud flap. So let's just get into all the injuries because there's a lot of them now. This is the type of stuff that just makes you want to just put a trash can lid on the whole season, you know. And I was just talking about it, how man, this just seems to be what wrecks the Saints season like every year for like the past 6 years, 5, 6 years, like every year. It's always one position just gets completely, absolutely wrecked by injuries. And this year it seems like it's center, and wide receiver actually. We'll get into that real quick. So let's just start with the first players. This list is long. It's got about a dozen players on it. But the first person on the list, we got a quarterback, Derek Carr, who got hit real hard at the end of the game against the Philadelphia Eagles. In hindsight, some would say that could have easily been called roughing the passer, but it wasn't, of course, because it's the Saints. But I guess he had some groin tightness after that. But we know Derek Carr is, even though he plays quarterback, he's arguably the toughest player on the team. You know, he can be having broken ribs, a bruised lung, sprained shoulder, RC joint or whatever, and a groin, a concussion, and he played every game last year, even with those issues. So he practiced all week and has no game status. And then this may be the only saving possible grace for this team is tight end Taysom Hill chest, but it was a bruised lung that they were kind of hiding for us until up until like game time. They finally kind of let people know that it's not just a chest, it's not ribs, it's not pec, but it's actually a bruised lung. But he's coming back, and he was full all week and has no game time designation. So Taysom Hill, Falcon killer, we're gonna need you. We're gonna need you more than probably any other game that they've had against the Falcons. We need a certified killer to be able to even be competitive probably against the Falcons, even though I know they're dealing with some similar issues. But I think the Saints are dealing with more issues at uh, multiple positions. I think for the most part, the Falcons are only really dealing with injuries on their offensive line, which is bad. You know, that kind of evens stuff up a little bit. But then when you have all these other players, you know, at other positions, it kind of makes you start to feel like, oh, maybe this could be an excuse. But let's continue here. So then we had linebacker DeMarco Jackson, who looks like he's finally healthy for the first time this season. Was been dealing with a calf injury, limited Wednesday, Thursday, and then was full on Friday, but no game time designation. But because he's finally healthy, and obviously they see something in him, might get to see some DeMarco Jackson because it looks like Demario Davis isn't going to play in this game for like the first time in his career. He's going to allow an injury to keep him out of the game, which people should have known that it was something relatively serious compared to anything that he'd been dealing with in the past. Because if it wasn't, it probably wouldn't have kept him out of that final drive, the third and 16 drive against the Eagles that ended up having three players running into each other like some clowns and falling down like some bowling pins. So, so we might get to see some Marco Jackson for the first time this season. And then we have defensive tackle Colin Saunders, calf, finally coming back and finally healthy for the first time of the regular season, which the Saints could use that, could need a boost on the defensive line, and especially at nose tackle. You know, need to be able to stop the run again. I really would prefer not having Bijan Robinson and Taylor Algier. I would really prefer them not going off for like 200 yards rushing again, like the Philadelphia Eagles did last week. So any little boost to the run game, that run defense, it would be nice. So it'd be nice to see Colin Saunders in there, and hey, maybe take a little bit of a load off of Taysom Hill playing fullback on some goal line carries if the Saints are actually able to get in the goal line and inside the 5 of the Falcons. And then we have cornerback Alontae Taylor, who's been dealing with just some illness, must have had the shits or something, but didn't practice on Wednesday, but was back full on Thursday and Friday. No game time designation, so that's a little bit of good news. It's crazy, really, that we have to take the only kind of good news we're getting from the Saints right now is that we fear that a player is going to be hurt or on the injury report, and then somehow he's healthy. Like, really, what would be nice is just not having maybe only having like 3 or 4 players on the injury report. I think I would enjoy that more, but still got to take the few positives with all the negatives, I guess. And then we have linebacker Demario Davis. Already kind of talked about him before, but he's dealing with a hamstring. Didn't practice all week and is out, and that's something new for Demario Davis, and I think that's just kind of a sign of times to come that like some players they just kind of become washed, but they can still stay healthy. That's Cam Jordan, but then we have these other players. They get old, and they can play great whenever they're healthy, but they just can't stay healthy anymore due to age. You know, they were Iron Men before that, but they hit a certain age, kind of that 30, 35 mark, and then just can't stay healthy. Even just a hangnail is keeping them out. And then let's see, and Alvin Kamara, this is maybe kind of like the Alontae Taylor one, where it's like, oh, maybe he will play, and geez, that's about the only good thing going for us right now. But I'm not 100% sure on it. He might not play because Alvin Kamara dealing with the hips and ribs, a hip flexor, didn't practice Wednesday, and then was limited Thursday and Friday, and then is questionable and probably a game time decision if I was to have to guess. And then we have a guard. I was talking other offensive linemen already. Talked about Eric McCoy being on IR. We have Cesar Ruiz, knee injury, some type of knee injury. Didn't practice all week and is out. So that's official. You'll have to have two new starters on the offensive line, if nothing else. Before the game's over, I think it might be three or four new starters, just with how the Saints' luck is going right now. And then a wide receiver, we took an atomic bomb or nuclear warhead or something must have went off in the wide receiver room because we have A.T. Perry on there, hamstring. I don't know how A.T. Perry keeps getting hurt and keeps coming down with illnesses when he doesn't even play. He's not even on the active roster the first 3 weeks, but somehow he keeps getting hurt. But A.T. Perry with a hamstring got hurt in practice on Wednesday, didn't practice on Thursday and Friday, and is out for the first game of the year where he may be active because we have injuries with Cedric Wilson and Chris Olave. Of course, he gets hurt in practice, which that was like the big thing about him is that he's not a good practice player. And he must have been practicing hard on that day because he's got a hamstring injury now. And when we need our third, fourth, fifth option the most, we don't have him. Perfect, great timing there. And then we have a wide receiver, Cedric Wilson Jr., who's dealing with the ankle injury. Must got hurt in practice on Wednesday too, and then was limited on Thursday, and then it must have flared up on Friday, and he is listed as questionable. So I guess that's more like a game time decision with him as well. And then we have Chris Olave, who was just added to the at the very end of the injury report in practice. We have Chris Olave. His hamstring started tightening up in practice, and they got him listed as day to day. Like it just couldn't get any worse. It's just like bad enough that your offensive line has just freaking completely imploded, and you already are have skills position players beat up with Alvin Kamara and Rashid Shaheed as your only seems like your only healthy wide receiver besides Mason Tipton and Bud Means uh, is hurt. So you just and Rashid Shaheed had like his worst game ever. Man, man, that's tough, man. I think I was gonna be kind of able to, you know, get through it and kind of make myself kind of think that it's okay and that the Falcons they're dealing with just as many injuries or just similar injuries. It should be equal. Like there's no excuse, but I think there's a bit of an excuse now that your whole wide receiver room is injured, and besides Rashid Shaheed, three of your five defensive offensive linemen, starting offensive linemen are hurt, and then your best and your quarterback of your defense is hurt. I'm like, damn, man, man, these injury reports are just getting harder and harder to go through this year. And man, it didn't take long. I jinxed it last week when it looked like, man, almost everyone's healthy. Man, that came to a close and an end real fast after that Philadelphia Eagles game. Not even after it, freaking during it. But all right, so you're getting a lot of tears from me today, but let's get into the Falcons. See if that can't be too happy about other teams' injuries, but man, you're just grasping at straws to just try to stay happy and keep that trash can lid off this. But so the first player on Falcons injury report is tackle Caleb McGarry dealing with a knee injury. He's their right tackle. He didn't practice. Didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, and then was limited Friday. But he is listed as out. And then their center, I think they either put him on PUP or IR. So their starting center is out as well. And then everyone else on their injury report is healthy. So you got linebacker Matthew Judon was dealing with a bit of a hamstring, and practice Wednesday was limited on Thursday and then full on Friday. No game status. Running back Bijan Robinson, shoulder injury, just got some rest. I think gets trying to get a little bit of extra rest, but no listing for Wednesday, was limited Thursday, full on Friday, no game designation. And then defensive line, Taquan Graham, rest on Friday. Defensive lineman, former Saints legend, David Onyemata, rest, just rest on Friday. And then defensive lineman Grady Jarrett, rest. He had rest on Friday, didn't practice, but no game status for any of those. So the Falcons are pretty much completely healthy besides their issues at tackle and center. But the Saints have the same issues, and then you can stack about 5, 6 more on top of it. So I don't compare the Saints injury report to the Falcons at all. Like the Saints is clearly much worse. Like before it came out that there was going to be no Olave and then it was for sure that Demario Davis was hurt and that it's a game time and decision for Alvin Kamara. I felt like it was going to be pretty equal and it wasn't going to be much of an excuse, but I guess we'll see how the game goes and how people are feeling about maybe using the injuries and the football gods as an excuse. All right, so that's the injury report. We got it. We know it. Let's go through some MVPs and hot takes and picks here and scores. I think my pick and score changed a little bit after I found out there's going to be no Chris Olave. But for my MVP for this game, I only pick one, even though we go back over MVP of offense, MVP of defense, and MVP of special teams. But the first time this year, I think I'm going MVP. I'm going to just pick my single MVP for the game. I'm going to go for on defense for the first time this year. I really kind of wanted to pick Taysom Hill as your Falcons killer, but I already picked him in week 1, and he did a lot blocking and all the moving around and stuff like that. But didn't put up huge numbers, even though he'll probably have 100 total yards from scrimmage against the Falcons, running and catching. So that's what I hope for, at least. That'd be nice, 100 scrimmage yards and a couple touchdowns from Taysom Hill. Falcons killer would be really nice. But I'm going defense for the first time, and who I'm going with is someone like out of all the old players that we've been talking about. I guess Tyrann Mathieu maybe a year or two younger than Cam Jordan and Demario Davis. But out of all those, your old veteran players that you have, the one that is still playing like prime honey badger, Tyrann Mathieu. I got to go with him because he's had 4 straight turnovers in his last 4 games dating back to last year. So he's had a turnover in 4 straight games, and he's just been. You can see he's putting it all out there every game. Even though he's up in his 30s, 32, 33, but the way he's hitting and tackling people and reading and trying to force fumbles and getting interceptions. Some of that went by the wayside in the Philadelphia game where he had a clutch red zone interception that just ended up going. You just kind of forget about stuff like that after a loss. But I'm going with Tyrann Mathieu in this game, and he easily gets my MVP nod if he gets another turnover in this game. It would be 5 straight games. So Tyrann Mathieu is my MVP. Now on to hot takes. Hot takes have been kind of a love-hate relationship for us this year, and the reason I say is definitely a love relationship to start the year is because it was all offensive line based. You basically I was given the Saints offensive line just tasks that you'd never think they'd be able to uphold. Keep Micah Parsons without a sack in game 1. Trevor Penning doesn't give up a sack, things like that. Well, and that all worked out for us. And then I picked the hot take for the Falcons or not the Falcons, but the Eagles to not have 100 yards rushing from the Saints, and that just completely blew up in my face. So I think I'm going to go back to a hot take related to the offensive line, and just because this is a Frankenstein last minute like put together type of offensive line, you got guys that you already weren't really overly confident still starting, and then you got guys in there that probably shouldn't be starting, probably shouldn't even hardly even able to be in the NFL are starting now. But even with that, I think the Falcons don't have that great of a pass rush. I think they're towards the bottom when it comes to the pass rush. So even with these two starters, and then I feel Landon Young is a little shaky because he's been injury prone as well. I think the Saints in this game aren't going to allow Derek Carr to be sacked once. So no sacks on Derek Carr. And that'll be the first time this year. He was sacked once in game one. No, he was sacked twice in game one, and then he was only sacked once uh, in the Dallas and the Eagles game. But in this game against the Eagles, Falcons hate week, Falcons, he's not going to be sacked at all in this game, even with the makeshift offensive line. So that's about as hot as it gets. That's how those those offensive line hot takes from the start of the season felt. They felt white hot. So this is feeling white hot, but hey, I hope it proves me wrong, or it proves me right, actually. So now on to the picks. Before Chris Olave got hurt and went down, I was going with the Saints to win this one. Uh, I thought they were going to win this one in a close, tight game. But man, I just with the offensive line, Demario Davis, and then just the cherry on top of Chris Olave just makes it hard to realistically pick them to win this game and to be honest about it. So I'm going to keep the same method of winning / losing, I guess, is how the game is going to go. So I'm picking the Saints to lose. So I'm picking the Falcons to win, but it's going to be a close game throughout, And at a point in the game, it's going to be, let's see, let's see, yeah, it'll be 20-13, and then the Saints will get a late touchdown, which could possibly make it 20-20 and make it a tied game. But it's late in the game, and with just how the game's been going and how the Falcons had started kind of moving the ball and looking a little bit better towards the end of the game, and just with how the Saints have been so beat up, they'll get it to 20-19. But then somewhere in Dennis Allen's head, also probably Clint Kubiak's as well, because it's all back to the offense. They're going to decide to go for 2 points. They're going to try to go for an extra point and try to win this game 21-20, but they're not going to get it, and they're going to lose 20-19. And you're going to hear all the noise from the Hoodats and Saints fans coming after not just Dennis Allen, but Clint Kubiak as well. So before I had the Raheem Morris, the Falcons coach, doing this stooge move, and the Saints being up by 20, and they score the late touchdown, 20-13, and make it to 19, and don't get the 2-point conversion, because that actually seems more like something Raheem Morris would do than Dennis Allen, just because Dennis Allen ain't quite as much of a risk taker. But just with the Chris Olave injury added on top of this, I just got to flip this around and see some ridiculousness from my head coach and offensive coordinator. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. And I hope we make it through this game, and I hope it goes a lot smoother than I'm anticipating and expecting. But I'm who dat, and I'm gonna stay down no matter what. And you'll see me here on Tuesday or Wednesday, no matter how this is going to go. But it feels a lot rougher than it did after the first 2 games of the week, and this feels a lot rougher and more intense and worse than it did just after Wednesdays, like the first injury report. It definitely culminated to just a car crash, basically. But I'll be here. You'll see me. So anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?